Hello, Internet family. I have a story time about aliens for those of you who are into this kind of thing. So, in the years 2010 to about maybe the next few years, I had a ton of extraterrestrial contact and activity, and just it blew my world wide open, blew my mind. Everything in my life changed, and it was super intense. One of the things that happened during that time, and this is in 2012, I believe, early 2012. It was still cold outside because that's part of the story. Or either that or late 2011 because it was cold. So I was having a ton of experiences. There would be other people around who would also see the same thing. So it wasn't just me and my brain, it was my whole community of close friends were having a bunch of experiences. And they were getting realer and realer. And I was also having meditative experiences, which I wrote about in my book, Instruction of a Starseed. This is during that time. In fact, this story might even be in that book. So there was one night where there had been a bunch of activity all that day. And as I was laying in bed at night, I lived in this little house out in the middle of the woods, no neighbors within eye view, and I did not have curtains on the windows because I loved the way the green looked and no one was back there. It was like a gravel road. It had used to be a hunting cabin in its first incarnation, the house that I was in. And I was having this activity where I'm laying in bed and outside my window there are lights blinking, gentle but definitely not forest, in the middle of the forest, nature lights, and they were blinking in response to my thoughts. And I have seen people having this experience now, which is why I'm bringing it up. So I'm laying in bed and I can see the glow from outside the window, from the angle where I'm laying in bed, and I'm asking questions and they're answering, and they're very kind and it's very sweet. Sorry, my cats are causing some mayhem around. That's the sounds. But my nervous system was flipping out so hard, and you guys may be experiencing this if you're having contact or you have had contact. And I don't know if this is a genetic thing. I don't know if it's a conditioning thing, perhaps all the above. There are theories in every which direction. But when something that intense is going to break your paradigm, like when the ET is around the corner sending you little signals and you know it could just walk in front of the window or you could just sit up and look out, at least in my experience, my heart was thudding, my physical body was flipping out as I'm just laying there, eyes open, looking and communicating with whatever's flashing the light. And so I thought to myself, and I've been trying for contact. I've been meditating, connecting with them, because this has been going on now for a couple years, this whole process. So in this telepathic conversation, I said, listen, thank you for coming. I know I've been calling you. I'm sorry, I can't see you. I will freak out. Like my body will freak out. I didn't know exactly what would happen physically, but I knew I wasn't gonna like it, whatever it was. So I didn't know what else to say, because I'm like, okay, you need to back off because this is too much for my physical body to take. So I said, could you leave me a note? And I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and I looked outside my front door and I looked outside my back door, and there was no note. And I shrugged my shoulders and went on, because this is years of activity that we're talking about. Sometimes stuff follows through super intensely, sometimes it doesn't. There's the gamut. So that day, it was my friend's birthday, and I was taking her to a nearby botanical garden museum type place for her birthday. And it was a surprise to her. She didn't know. No one else knew where I was going. And it was about an hour away. So in the morning I get dressed, and after I've looked, just kind of peeked out to see if there's anything, there wasn't. Okay, let it go. I get dressed. She comes over, I pick her up or something. We drive over to the place, and she was one of the people who's had these experiences with me. So we would talk about that kind of stuff, and when we would see little marks of it or little synchronicities to point us back to experiences that we'd had, we would talk about it, because we're trying to figure this stuff out. You know, what is going on? I want to know. So you don't get here by being a passive brain. If you are, you will never even look into this kind of stuff because it's not fun if you don't like to dig. Okay. So we go inside, we see some shows, we see some exhibits. It's cool. We see a lot of ET synchronicities and we're both feeling the vibe, but nothing super intense happens. We go start wandering around on the grounds and the weather is cold. So there are parts of the gardens that are closed. This is where that comes back in. We go to this back part of one of the gardens at the edge of another garden, and it's got a little 3-walled cabin thing that they store stuff in. And there looks to be a little perfectly stacked pile of sticks. And on top of it, there was a folded piece of paper. And the paper was a little damp with dew, and it hadn't rained, but it had been kind of wet, so you could tell it had been out all night. It hadn't just been sat there. And it was sitting up like this. It was folded in half, and it was sitting up like this. And on the front it said, "I believe this was meant for you." And I saw it with my friend, and I don't remember if I had told her the story of asking for a note. I'm not sure. I eventually told her, because I didn't realize that it was that note yet. My brain didn't connect it. But we saw it and we picked it up, and there was no one in these back corners of the gardens. Like, it's kind of deserted back there. We had snuck our way back there. So I still hadn't made the connection. I figured it was for both of us. It was her birthday. So I'm very her-centric at the time. Like, I guess it's for you. And afterward, after reading it, she told me, she's like, yeah, it was fine and all, but it didn't hold some big significance for her. The language didn't. And on the letter it said that we opened it. It was on a stationery very similar to the stationery in my notebook at the time. Whatever journal I was in had a margin of color and scroll work. This paper also had a margin of color and scroll work in a very similar style, but different actual stuff. It wasn't identical, but close enough to be weird. And written in script said something like, "I knew it would be hard. I knew you would worry, but I will wait until morning because I have faith in your search." I remember the word search. It was kind of hard to read. It took me a while to note that it said search. "Because I have faith in your search. Whenever you want to give up, remember why you came here, and remember that this too shall pass." And that was what was on the note. It was not signed, anything. And then a little while later, I realized, maybe she realized if I had already told her, that I had asked for a note the night before. And I still have that note. It's in a journal. It's sitting in the middle of a journal's pages in California in storage. So, thought I would share. If you have questions, ask them. I will be happy to answer whatever I know. And if you have other experiences, I would love to know what you experienced. Blessings.